That left only 300 people, 300 men that God would go against an army of 135,000. He would do it with 300 and win the war. What did they do different? What did they do different? It says that they knelt down to drink the water, and they cupped the water in their hands and brought the water up to their mouths. How is this different? Much in every way. It was different in that they didn't kneel down on all fours like a dog. They stooped down and they cupped the water out. So if we keep with the theme that water has always been sort of a symbol, bodies of water have always been sort of a symbol of the world, they didn't bow down to the world and lap it up like a dog. They just lap up what the world has to offer. What they did was they stooped down, cupped the water out, and used only what was needed. And because they didn't bow down completely, their attention could still be focused on what's happening on the battlefield. So they got the water up, they got what they needed, and they got it for nourishment. And they didn't posture themselves in such a way that resembles them bowing down to the ways of the world. They cupped the water, they brought it up to their mouths with their eyes still on the battlefield, basically. And God was able to show Gideon why these men were the right men. They would use the world for what was needed. They would keep their eye on the world, staying vigilant on what's going on, even while they are consuming what they need. But these are the guys who are not going to be caught off guard. The guys who knelt down and put their face to the water, they are easily caught off guard. Also, it's not going to be that easy for them to turn around and get ready to engage because they have to get up and sort of reorient themselves to what's going on. Whereas the 300 were vigilant at all times, always vigilant. They could drink the water and they could still see what's going on. And because they haven't knelt down, they're ready to engage immediately. All of this wasn't happening at that moment, but their actions symbolize their demeanor, their disposition. It symbolized how they would react in the real situation when they engage in the war. They're going to stay vigilant, they're going to stay watching, and they're going to take their rations as needed so that they can stay engaged in the battle. These men were not cowards. These men were ready for the world. They were ready to take it to the world. And then in Judges chapter 7, verse 7, it says, "And the Lord said to Gideon, by these 300 men that lapped," in other words, when they brought the water to their mouth, "these will I save you and deliver the Midianites into your hand. And let all other people go, every man to his own place." So remember, there were 10,000 that came to the water. 22,000 had already went back home. They were afraid. They went back home. There was 10,000 left. And then out of the 10,000, 300 were selected by God to go into the war with the Midianites. And the rest we know, as they say, is history. They did go against the Midianites, and they did win the battle. But that's going to be another message for another day. But the fact of the matter is, this is the essential aspect of what I wanted to present. Now, this being said, I think that we are in a crossroads. Christianity is at a crossroad. We need to open up our eyes and look at the landscape of the world, especially here in America, and see what's happening. Now, I don't know how you could be a Christian and not see what's happening. I don't know how you can be a Christian and not be getting yourself ready to engage in a serious spiritual warfare. I don't know how you could be. If you are happy with what you're seeing, chances are you're not a Christian. Chances are you're not a Christian. Jesus says something in Luke. In Luke 18. Let me bring this up here. In Luke 18, it says, Jesus says this in verse 6. Hear what the unjust judge says. And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? Notice what he says in verse 8. I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith on earth? Christ says this, that when the Son of Man returns, when he comes back, he asks the question, shall he find faith on earth? And his point is that not very much. Not very much. Now, I really believe that when you're going to tell the truth, you're going to significantly reduce the number of those who are willing to listen to you. Now, let me get where I'm going with this. We, of all people, should be able to call out wickedness when we see it. I'm not talking about everyday wickedness. I'm not talking about everyday sin. I'm talking about peculiar evil. A peculiar type of evil that we as believers are supposed to be able to recognize. I'm not talking about everyday wickedness. Everybody's a sinner. We know that. We all know that no one's perfect. This is what the common cliches people like to say to rationalize bad things. I'm not perfect. But if you as a believer do not recognize what is going on now, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Christ says that when he comes to earth, it will be virtually free. At least from what we can tell visibly of any serious amount of serious Christianity. Christianity will go until the end of the age. But there will be few Christians in that Christianity. Gideon's army started with 32,000 people and got distilled down to 300 people. God hasn't changed. God hasn't changed. And he is going to select his 300. Will you be one of those among them? If you are a Christian, will you be among his 300, like Gideon's 300? Or are you going to be one of these sideline Christians? One of the Christians who needs to go back home and take care of the ministries, the useless ministries that do nothing about bringing souls to salvation. We have a man in this country that has been elected or not as president. And I'm telling you This is a wicked man. Now, it doesn't matter to me how many followers I lose. I don't really care about that stuff. But I'm telling you, what is happening in America right now is on a whole nother level of evil and wickedness. And if you don't see it, you are blind as a bat and not suited to be able to call yourself a Christian. God says this in Isaiah 66:4. I will also choose their delusions. I will choose. God says he will choose their delusions and bring their fears upon them. Why? Because when I called, none answered. When I spoke, they did not hear. But they did evil before my eyes, and they chose that in which I delighted not. Donald Trump is not the Antichrist, but he is definitely an agent of the Antichrist system. No doubt about it. All of these men, all of these wealthy men, all of these rich folks, all of these powerful people in government who are aligning themselves together. The Prime Minister of Israel, Putin in Russia, Trump and Elon Musk here. These people are going for blood. You mark my words. Mark my words. This is an evil arrangement that we are seeing being built up around us. And there is going to be no way out of it unless God intervenes. And when God intervenes, he intervenes with his people. And when God intervenes with his people, he uses the smallest number of them possible. The smallest number of God's true, believing, faithful people can overthrow a sea of governments. Everything that the Lord is doing, he is doing for his people. I'm talking to God's people now. I'm not talking to the atheists. Not talking to the agnostic. I'm not talking to the Catholic or the SDA or the Jehovah's Witness. I'm not talking to these folks. I'm talking to God's true believers. Those whom God has not sent the delusion. They know it. They know what's going on. They see it. They see it. They hear it. They feel it. They know it's happening. I'm telling you, do not fear or be afraid. Because whether he's taking us into captivity, we can't stop it. Or whether or not he's going to use us to overthrow them, they can't stop it. Either way it goes, God's people are always going to be preserved before him. And he is going to destroy everything that gets in the way of his people and his glory, which is made manifest through the agency of his people. These people that we have in government right now are evil, wicked, desperately wicked people. They are greedy. They are starving for power. They are drunk and obsessed with it. And we need to seek God's justice in dealing with them. And make no mistake about it, he is going to deal with them. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, it talks about the wicked being revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the spirit of his mouth, and that he will destroy with the brightness of his coming, the son of perdition, the man of sin. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. And notice this, verse 11. Paul certainly knew what Isaiah talked about, because Paul basically says the same thing. Because they, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in those that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved, for this cause, for this reason, because of this, God shall send them strong delusion. Why? Why is God sending them a strong delusion? He tells you why. So that they will believe a lie. So that they will believe a lie. Listen, God says that he is going to be the one. Now, Christians, you can look at this in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 11 and see for yourself. This is what it says. God will send them a strong delusion so that they should believe the lie. Christians should be asking themselves the question, what does that mean? What do you mean God is sending a delusion? That's not what God does. He's all about love and harmony and peace and joy and grace and mercy and compassion. He's all of those things. But here it says, he is going to be the one that sends the delusion to those who had pleasure in unrighteousness, to those who are being damned because they believe not the truth, those who did not receive the truth that they might be saved. God says, I'm going to send them a delusion, and not just any delusion. I'm going to send them a strong delusion. A strong one. A delusion that cannot be escaped. A delusion that they are going to be forced to believe because it's going to be so strong. And he says that the reason that he is going to send the delusion is so that they will believe a lie. He wants them to believe a lie. If they won't come to the truth, if they won't eat the bread of life, if they won't drink the wine of life, the blood of Christ, if they won't eat and drink his blood, those who reject Christ, he is going to feed them the lie. He's going to feed them a strong delusion so that they believe a lie. That is what God's intention is. That's not just his intention. He says this is what he is going to do. Imagine the possibility of you believing a lie, but you believe because of the strength of the delusion that it is true. We need to understand, Christians, that there is no doubt that the speed with which we are advancing toward the Lord's return seems to be picking up hyper momentum. We have one man. We have one man on earth that has so much money that he could literally give every man on earth $1 million and he would still be one of the richest men in the world, if not the richest. And all these men who are wealthy, Gates, Trump, Musk, the Mars family, the Rothschilds, all these people, they are all part of the cabal. The Pope, they are all part of the cabal that we know as Antichrist. All of them. They all belong to the same system. They all belong. And if you have a true heart for God, you need to understand something. You will never beat them at their own game. Because they are vicious, evil people that will stop at nothing to consume and to absorb everything that we as people depend on and need. They want to create dependence on them. They don't want people worshiping God unless they benefit from that too. You heard our president just say recently that churches are business that should pay taxes. I disagree with him, and I agree with him. I think the churches should pay taxes. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because maybe they'll be more serious about their message that they preach, because they won't be depending on money. They won't have to be begging for money. You know why? Do you know why? I'm sure most of you don't know why. And what I mean is this. You can't know why unless I tell you what I'm telling you to know why about. In the 70s, in the late 60s, going into the 70s, you had politicians. Politicians going to the churches and saying, look, we are going to make significant contributions to your churches. Significant. We're going to make significant contributions to your churches. We're going to support your churches. And we're going to give you a platform to reach more people, to raise more money. We're going to give you the tax breaks. On top of that, on top of making contributions, now we're going to give you tax breaks. These were American politicians. And I'm explaining to you how these mega churches got their start. They got their start from politicians. And the Republican politicians led the charge in this. They led the charge. And what they convinced these churches to do, and these were mostly all, white churches, in Middle America, Southern America, all these places, it's, Southern Baptist churches, all these people, Falwell and Swaggart and all those old school mega churches. The blue-eyed devil-looking guy, Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, all these churches, all these mega churches that got their starts. They got their start by taking money from politicians in exchange for their church rosters, for their memberships. They wanted phone numbers, they wanted addresses, and they wanted names. And this gave rise to the mega church. This is how it all started. You go back to the 60s and 70s, you see how it started. If you're a student of social history as it relates to the church and its advancement, all these mega churches got rich from politicians. The politicians made contributions to their memberships, and politicians encouraged the other members of the churches to contribute. Then they gave the tax breaks to the church. So now they got the money, and they got the money to them. They gave them the tax break to keep the money, and then the government facilitated in giving them airtime on national television. And so as the churches grew, the people that go to those churches grew into the political landscape that was being forged between the ministers of these churches and the Republican Party. I'm not saying Democrats didn't do the same thing too, but Republicans were successful at it. So this is why you have all these ministers. This is why you have all these ministers that are so big and they're billionaires. But this is how they got their start. Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, Benny Hinn, Jimmy Swaggart, Sarah Huckabee, her father, Sarah Huckabee's father. All these mega church preachers, this is how they got their start. They sold you out and you didn't even know it. They had a problem with what we refer to today. They had a problem with what we refer to as today as the black church. The black church had a problem with them. And I don't like the term black church, by the way. Christ only made one church. But I bring this up to make a point. The black church resisted. But primarily what motivated and what's significant about what motivated black churches from subscribing to it was that black churches and black folks were still under this iron fist that the American government had in terms of providing ways for them to advance as a people. Black people were still trying to fight the achieving equality and an equal standing, something that has never been achieved. Never been achieved. There are people who might like to think that has been achieved, but it hasn't. But when that did happen, because black churches and people were fighting for civil rights and things like this, they didn't succumb to the man, so to speak. But we see now the quote unquote black church is falling apart. It's falling apart. Why? Because the illusion or the delusion of being made free has captivated them. So you got a few black folks who became millionaires, and even and only a handful, we're talking about maybe 10 in America who are billionaires, maybe a couple more. But by and far, nothing in comparison to the rest of the wealthy. But the prospect has been made an aspirational quality that exists in the eyes of black and brown people that makes them believe they can make it under the system. But what they don't know is that those who are really in power have constructed a way to make people feel that the aspirational qualities of success can be easily achieved when it does not work that way. So it is the illusion of believing that because you're making money, that everything is good. That is the cause, a big part of the cause for the failure and the breakdown of the quote unquote black church. And what it results is this. Here's what the result is. All of these churches, black churches, white churches, Asian churches, whatever, churches in America are a business. They are fronts. They are religious fronts for capital gains. They are religious fronts for capitalistic and monetary gains. Even the church doesn't care about you. They don't care about me. But the world needs to understand something. God's people, his true people, his true faithful servants are going to always be with him, and they will always be his instruments that he is going to use, the faithful ones, to bring about radical change in the minds and the hearts of sinners. They don't know it yet. The world doesn't realize it yet, but it is us, believers, who they should fear. They should fear the Christian voices that God's ear entertains. They don't know that they should fear you. And maybe you don't know that they should fear you. Maybe you have so much fear that this will never be something that you can lay hold of. But Christians, I am telling you, this world, this nation especially, should fear God. Which means they should fear every person who is a true believer, who is bent on seeing God glorified in every aspect of our existence. Be provoked and be persuaded.